He meant this. He meant this. Yeah.
Some of you out there may disagree, but I think Bob Gibson was the greatest pitcher who ever threw a baseball. Listen carefully. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Matthew 10:16. Let me say good morning. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about that familiar passage from the Sermon on the Mount, especially the wise as serpents part. It's one of those numerous biblical texts that you're unlikely to hear from all those belligerent Christian nationalists out there. But it keeps bouncing around in my brain. I think it's because ever since November 6th of last year, and more so since January 20th of this year, I'm as confounded as I know many of you are. I'm certainly not feeling very wise. And I guess you could say I'm feeling alarmingly sheepish, lost, powerless, and led astray. There's a meme that's been around for a while attributed to Einstein, although its authorship is pretty widely disputed. No matter, I'm sure you've heard it. It claims that one definition of insanity is repeating the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. These days, I think that serves up a challenge to consider if we are not going a little insane ourselves. So I thought a brief audio-visual clip from one of my favorite all-time TV shows might help bring the question home to us. It'll take just a second.
What does a yellow light mean? Slow down. Okay. What does a yellow light mean? Slow down. Okay. What yellow light mean? Slow down.
For those of you who don't remember the wonderful comedy Taxi, that test taker was the once drug-addled character Jim Ignatowski, affectionately known as Reverend Jim, trying again and again to get his friends to help him answer what was for him a difficult question. He keeps trying, and they keep trying, but nothing good comes of it. It only gets worse. And I'm sorry to say, so it goes for many of us. Only not with a silly dilemma in a comedy, but with the most dire situation we stewards of what was once a great country have ever faced. We question, we protest, we vote, We do what we can again and again, but it only gets worse. I need to pause here for a moment and tell you my concern that you're not going to like what I'm about to say. That troubles me because I want you to like me. I've come to love this community, and I'm pretty sure we're all on the same side, even if after almost 6 years, I'm sometimes still befuddled by your religion. As some of you know, I am, and I'm pretty sure I'll always be, an Episcopalian. I take no little pride in what leaders in my denomination, like Bishop Buddy, have courageously stepped up to say. I also identify as a hopeless progressive, a liberal, a tree hugger, a believer in compassion and tolerance and the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. And I found such a welcoming home right here in this little congregation that I'd have no problem being confused for a Unitarian Universalist. In fact, I'd be honored. But that doesn't mean that I'm entirely happy or sympathetic with where I believe some of us find ourselves, or what I believe some of us are espousing that strikes me as falling short of serpent-like wisdom. I've preached here a couple of times before about our need to pay close, thoughtful attention to what appeals to those with whom we passionately disagree. I've also preached about how we, like Pogo, have met the enemy, and he is us. I've posited how some of our cherished causes may have alienated so many people that we've ended up sabotaging what we fight for by being perceived as elitist and self-righteous enough to inspire millions of votes against us. A million years ago, after my hitch in the Navy and before I went into the ministry, I spent a few misplaced years as a banker on Wall Street. One of the most meaningful insights I took from that experience came from a senior officer of the bank who told me, I can win just about any battle I have with the corporate office. I just can't win them all. What that meant to me is you have to pick your battles if you want to move ahead. And this is where I'm afraid I'm going to lose you, or at least some of you. In needing to pick what battles you're going to fight, if your fight is to be effective, you're almost surely going to need to pick other battles to set aside for another day. Perhaps even the battle that strikes closest home to you. Here we are, this beloved community, this compassionately principled community, this community that I love and know that you love as well. Each of us is here carrying the causes and concerns we most dearly care about. But in a congregation, as in a democratic nation, not every concern is going to carry the same priority. If we're to be wise, given today's political map, I think we're called, first of all, to engage in battles where we're most likely to be effective, most likely to win. Doing that often entails sacrifice. Some of the causes we hold most dearly, no matter how noble they may be, no matter how reflective of our principles, may need to be, at least in the short run, given a lower priority in favor of what's more crucial. Not forgotten, mind you, not forsaken, but held in reserve until such time as they can be effectively acted on. Recently, Sue and I were inspired to rescreen Ken Burns' magnificent series on the Civil War. What moved me more than anything in seeing that was a reminder of just how remarkable Lincoln's leadership was and what seems to have made it so. He was no purist. I'm convinced that in his heart he always deplored slavery, but some of his greatness came from his keen attunement into the minds and hearts of those who believed differently. Throughout the entire war, he never really stopped being the president of Americans on both sides of the battle lines. And he was often ruthless in his stratagems to preserve the Union so that finally there emerged a way for our better angels to prevail. There you have it. Who knew the crux of American history could be given to you in a paragraph? But I hope you take my point. Purity did not preserve the Union and end slavery. Wisdom did. Knowing the other side did. I worry a lot, dear friends, as I know you do too. My worry these days that our gentle, dove-like hearts sometimes sacrificed wisdom for the sake of purity. My own heart embraces that purity, but only until it becomes self-defeating. And I see that happening out there right now in ways that I find terrifying. Call me naive. I'm looking for some Bob Gibson-like competitiveness. We really, really need to win, to once again fight to preserve the Union. There's more at stake today than at any time, at least since the last Civil War. And if we can't craft a message to get through to more of those voters who disdain us, what use are our lofty beliefs? A lot of my despair arises more from the ineptitude of leaders I agree with than from the insidious effectiveness of those hell-bent on tearing our country and its people apart. Let me try to illustrate what I'm getting at. Take guns as one example. I hate America's insane gun culture. In acting on that belief, I've traveled to huge rallies with hundreds of thousands of like-minded folks to make my voice heard. I've posted countless times on social media. I've agreed with many of you. But maybe it's time for me to ask what good that actually accomplished. Maybe I need to think twice about whether or not campaigning, even for sensible, modest gun reform, is actually going to end up feeding right into the vote of that neighbor of mine who's been conditioned to believe I'm assaulting his constitutional rights. I think he needs to know that I've heard him, that we've heard him, even if we believe him misguided. I think it's more important, first, to win his vote, and second, to trust that I and others aren't going to forget about tackling gun madness when we've amplified our credibility and won more votes. Or global warming. If I had my way, I'd gladly sacrifice a lot for a massive clean energy endeavor that would make the Manhattan Project puny in comparison. Nevertheless, shouldn't I pause for a moment before I go to the mat on that to try to suss out how proclaiming what's so obvious and urgent in my mind is going to play with all the climate change deniers out there. Not because I think I should cave into their head in the sand rush towards planetary suicide, but because I have a much more challenging task in front of me, winning their votes. Give me a sane and principled government, and then let's go full force for gun reform, saving the planet, genuine equity, and all the other things that loom so crucially before us. But give me the sanity and more credibility than we have right now first. I read this in the Washington Post on February 26, an analysis of gains by moderates in the recent election, and it went this way. The sooner partisans and pressure groups reject the seductive notion that America actually wants their specific version of ideological purity rather than moderation that might compromise principles they value, the sooner they will win more elections and get more of the policy they want. Don't you want to do something besides repeating louder the same messages that just haven't played well enough yet? I think there's a case to be made that that tactic is insane. Much more important than our getting every principled message out is first figuring out how we can focus on messages with broader appeal, how we can know the other side enough to make our fight effective. We need to figure out how to reach a whole lot of people we're just not reaching. We need to pay attention to what's winning their votes. We need to think about them as much as we think about ourselves, to think not so much disdainfully as strategically, as serpents as well as doves. Doing that may well be the hardest thing we've ever done. But my question for you is the same one I have for myself. What are you willing to give up, or at least modulate, even if it's a cause or belief you cherish, to reach them? If we can figure out how to do that, then those beliefs we hold most dearly will have a chance. But if not, well, take a look around out there.